All right. Hi, guys. We are back with another episode of the Ascend podcast. Today, I'm going to be joined by two of our coaches, Coach Tristan over here and Coach Mahmood. You guys are pretty familiar with these two by now. Today, we're going to do just a little coach's opinion and breakdown of a topic in the sport of CrossFit, which was a big one. CrossFit for health versus sport, what those two different avenues look like, how we at Ascend cater to both, and how they really work symbiotically, and but also how a coach can help you separate kind of those two goals. So I'm going to start off by talking about a little bit just about our one-on-one programs. We do have one-on-one coaching that is done remotely. So you're getting personalized program check-ins and all of those good things via your coach remotely from anywhere in the world. And the coach's job in a one-on-one coaching situation is to learn what each individual athlete or client's goals are and how they can meet them with the programming, with the coaching, and get them to those goals, whether it be in the CrossFit for health realm, the CrossFit for sport realm, or some kind of mix in the middle. And it may fluctuate based on kind of where you're at in a specific time of life, if you're dealing with an injury and kind of coming back to that, where the focus needs to be. Mm-hmm. So today, I am joined by two of our very experienced remote coaches to kind of talk about that topic, debate it a little bit, and just talk about how we would get each one of those different clients to those specific goals, whether it be health versus sport. Cool. All right. So let's start off just talking a little bit about our past experience with athletes with different goals for health versus sport and programming for each of those goals.
The thing that always jumps out to me in this conversation, like you have the easy stuff between health and competition, right? Like time commitment and all that stuff. I think the first real learning curve I had early on in coaching and remote coaching with this was exercise selection for different athletes if they're not competitive, right? There are plenty of people who can use and, train with CrossFit methodology and all that stuff, but they don't necessarily need to have the typical exercise selection that we might see in a competitor's, programming. They don't need to necessarily snatch 2 to 3 times a week or whatever. They don't need to do pistols. They don't need to do muscle ups, right? So learning that the whole bucket of exercises that we have in CrossFit doesn't necessarily apply. And then also understanding there's a whole lot of exercises we don't typically use in sport training for CrossFit that are perfectly applicable for those people to do, right? Like I distinctly remember I had a client who just wanted to like look better and be healthier and stuff like that. And I programmed an AMRAP of curls and tricep extensions for him. And he loved it. He thought it was the best thing ever. So just that's one of the biggest separators for me is looking at exercise selection and things like that. You can't hear me, can you?
No, we can hear you.
No, you both were making a face, and I was like,
damn it. To call it out, and the little ticker at the bottom, Ascend was misspelled. And Mahmood texted me to fix it, and I real sly did it while you were talking, and then we both smiled when it popped up and fixed it.
I was like, oh no, what is happening?
Now that everyone that's listening to this on just audio,
that's fine.
That's a great description of what just happened. But yeah, so we're all set. Ticker is updated. But yeah, totally agree. And I also think that this has been a little bit of a learning curve too through the evolution of CrossFit. In maybe the beginning years of CrossFit, it was first marketed as a methodology for health. And then it kind of evolved into a sport that is the CrossFit Games. So the methodology was pushed further outside of its capacity. And those movements that were originally made for health were kind of being repeated over and over to the point to try to excel at them as movements to be adapted for sport. And we, even for the sport people, got so far into kind of repetitions and repeatability of those single movements that we left kind of some of those other things that you mentioned out of the training because people were so specifically trying to get better at those sport specific movements that now I feel like things have come a little bit more full circle and to maintain the health and longevity of some of those athletes, movements like that have been brought back into training for the sport to offer more variation, to make sure that overuse injuries and things that support, like I said, their longevity in the sport are being trained as well, and not just those movements that have been turned into sport-specific movements that were originally for health.
Right.
Kind of, if that makes sense. So it's been an evolving, I feel like, continuum over the last 10 to 20 years of where we're at as a methodology and community, and what is good for health and what is good for sport too.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like when CrossFit started 2007, 2008, they were all about, we're here for health, we're here for everybody should be doing the same thing. And I used the sport to kind of promote that picture of like how fit you can get, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they soon realized once they got into like 2014, 2015, oh, we're going to push these athletes beyond the limit of their capabilities. And I think at this point there was kind of a separation between, okay, this is going to be a competitive athlete versus this is going to be I just want to use the methodology itself for being fit or for just maintenance or for losing some weight. And I think like even circling back now, as you said, Emily, like you can see that they are putting a lot of effort into getting some of those fundamental movements back into a competitive way. Like single unders this year, like wall walks in the open last year. All those were like, when people look at it, it was like, oh, this is a new movement. But in all fairness, this was the beginning of how he did a handstand push-up. This was the beginning of how he did a double under, and people just stopped practicing it. So it's very cool to see that like evolution going, as you said, full circle. And I think that in this time right now, in this decade, let's say, of CrossFit, it is kind of very difficult to just say, I'm going to do CrossFit for health, or I'm going to do CrossFit for sport. Or in other words, they don't negate each other. If I'm doing CrossFit for sport, I still need to do it for health in order for me to be long enough or to maintain my longevity in sport. If I'm doing CrossFit for health, I need the little bit element of sport to make it more fun and more exciting as I go, and to sustain that CrossFit methodology for a longer duration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's what gets a lot of people, even if they are doing CrossFit for health, bought into the methodology, right? Like it is fun when the clock goes and there is a little bit of element to sport. You see progress from week to week or month to month. You're hitting those PRs. Those are the little elements of sport for everyone, and why we call all people that participate in CrossFit athletes. It's because there is that little bit of competitive nature within it inherently. I think some of the issues at the top level of the sport with kind of debating whether they're training for sport or health comes in when our top athletes in the field, probably they're very good at the sport that they do, but are they actually the healthiest human beings? Mm-hmm. Probably not.
Probably not.
There's a point at where the returns on health when you're focusing on sport diminish, and you could be healthier, you could be functioning in less pain, maybe better gut health, if you
hormonal profile.
Right, exactly. Everything that's kind of been pictured and encapsulated in our quote unquote definition of health, where the sport at some point starts to take away from those metrics.
And I think that is where, in the last couple of years in particular, coaches have gotten a lot better about reintroducing healthy CrossFit training in their competitive athletes periodization in some point of the year, right? In their off season or whatnot, depending on the athlete or whatever their seasonal structure looks like, pulling back from the super high intensity work, pulling back from the super high volume work, doing more single joint isolation stuff, tempo, things like that, letting your body have time to recover. I mean, it's something nutrition coaches do as well. If you're on a fueling protocol for the CrossFit Games, your fueling protocol after the CrossFit Games is usually very, very different in terms of carbohydrate intake and things like that, because you're trying to give the gut a rest and things like that from processing all those carbs and all that sugar. So I think that's kind of where, to your point about it being very cyclical in nature, where we've seen kind of better balance in training programs and programming from coaches in the sport who coach at a high level, because if you just, if the athletes are just rode hard and put away wet, they're not going to have a very long career. And then they're going to have those, lasting issues. And there's all kinds of physiological issues, especially on the female side, right? Like exercise-induced amenorrhea and like all kinds of things like that. And on the men's side, like it's really easy to tank a guy's testosterone and hormonal profile from overtraining and lack of sleep. So I think that's kind of what we've seen come back in the last couple of years.
And that's in any sport. Like any professional athlete will be subject to that. It's
Right.
not a CrossFit special. Like in any, even like not just sports, like there's a saying, like if you want to excel at something, you can't do it in moderation, right? And if you're not doing something in moderation, it's probably the harm to benefit is going to be skewed to what you want versus the ideal picture.
Right. It's a trade-off. And it's just now the CrossFit space is a lot better at understanding that trade-off doesn't have to be 365, right?
100%. Yeah.
It can be periodized and more sustainable and kind of dampen those injurious effects.
Yeah.
And that's why I love how CrossFit athletes, or a lot of CrossFit athletes, especially on the elite level, when they stop competing, they don't stop doing CrossFit. And that's really big in how you can take something that is meant to be doing a professional sport where like you don't see a lot of soccer players continuing to like go to their team and train after, like, right? Yeah, like it's either like with the family and stuff. And that's, again, not just calling one sport out, but that's for any sport. So I think that it's a pretty cool concept that you can kind of alter your programming in order to shift that balance a little bit between what you want and what you need, and when you want it and when you need it.
Right.
I think maybe the tough thing about our sport is compared to other sports where you're absolutely right. When you're prioritizing sport and performing at the elite level in any other sport, you're always looking at this trade-off. But it's a little harder to find the distinction within our sport, whether like what is training for sport and what is training for health, and kind of where and when that shift is happening. And a lot of times it does take the guidance for those elite athletes from a coach or someone from an outside perspective to help them find that distinction, because our sport's still relatively really young. And from the beginning, they were marketed as the same thing. They were marketed as this methodology is the way to excel at that sport. So it can be really kind of tough for people to find where to take some of that intensity down and where to find health within CrossFit if their focus has been very narrowly sport for a long time.
I think it's a consequence of the fact that the preparation for our sport is our sport.
Yeah.
Whereas, football, like obviously like they do scrimmages and drills and things like that, but your strength and conditioning, agility work, conditioning and things like that is not a football game.
Right.
And most of the sports in the world.
You don't go find a pickup football game to play. Right. You go revert back to the training and stuff that made you excel at football. And ours just happens to look really similar.
Basically the same thing. I mean, if we look at it from a Metcon or really a Metcon standpoint, like strength work can vary a lot and things like that. But if you're going to do a mixed modal CrossFit style conditioning workout, it's probably going to look like something that could be programmed for the sport for the most part.
Yeah. Which is unique about our sport too. It's awesome. It really brings the community together. A lot of people that are doing CrossFit more for health and for their daily workout, their stress relief. They come into the affiliate, it's their community, it's their happy place, can really relate and identify with those people that are doing it for sport, because they're in the trenches. They know what 100 wall balls feels like when all of a sudden that's programmed at the games. They can uniquely identify with those athletes' capabilities. But it does make it a harder distinction between what you're training for and can easily blur the lines.
Yeah.
And I think like that's where the sport element comes in to benefit the health element, when they come kind of like overlap a little bit, where the affiliate members or people who are doing it for health, they look up to the professional athletes or people doing it for sport, like, oh, what did they do? I wanted to get like as close. It's just that excitement factor that like, did I progress? Did I not progress? All that. More of a mindset factor that plays into making that CrossFit for health more sustainable, more exciting, more tangible progress compared to like going to I don't know, just running every day, which again, nothing against running, but just it's the more of the community factor, more of like I'm looking up to people who are doing this sport professionally and comparing myself to them in the open, in quarterfinals, in every day's workout. And that's a pretty cool concept that you won't find in a lot of sports.
I think it keeps it fun in a sense for like you have those situations, right, where like I can think of a couple people at our, HQ affiliate CrossFit Greater Heights where if there's a lifting metcon or there's, a 1RM something or another, like they're going to be gunning for our top athletes because they're super strong, right? And like that makes it a little bit fun. And then, same thing if we look at like maybe an endurance-based workout, like we have some people with some engines and they're in no way a really well-rounded competitor and they do CrossFit every day for health and longevity. But if they get a workout that's in their wheelhouse, they might be coming for you. And it makes it fun and keeps a good relationship, I think, between the higher level competitors and the people who are kind of training every day for health. You get that one workout and it's like, hey man, I'm just an average Joe and I'm going to put it on you right now. And I think it's a fun little thing that happens.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to a question. In an affiliate setting or just anywhere, would you argue that the only people training for sport are those with goals of competing as an elite athlete and participating in our quote unquote sport at the highest level? Or would you, and then considering everyone else that's kind of coming to the affiliate and whatnot as for health, or do you think that there's an element of training for sport within the affiliates? Like maybe this person isn't going to the CrossFit Games, but all of their goals right now are performance based. Is that a sport athlete or is that a health athlete?
I would say that's a sport athlete. Mahmoud, what would you say?
I honestly, if I would be honest with this person, I need to know what he prioritizes. Like, would you prioritize your performance over your health, or would you prioritize your health over performance? And I've had that discussion with many people, especially when it comes to like after a workout and they're frustrated that they didn't do that well. I was like, okay, what are you doing correctly in order to fuel your desire or goal? And what is your goal to begin with? Are you doing the right things? Are you like, if you're an athlete, you need to make sure that everything out of the gym is also ideal and optimized. If that's your performance based, or if performance goals are the only thing that you're looking for. But if you cannot possibly do that, if I can't sleep more than 4 hours a day, if I can't eat well because I'm on the road the whole time, then let's try and make CrossFit something that is more sustainable and not worry about one workout score. Right. And yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say and that's very common to kind of like shift between both every now and then, especially for people who did develop quite a good base, including myself sometimes. Like I ask myself, like, okay, am I going to the games? Probably not. Am I gonna try and make it to local competitions and have fun with it? Is that a performance versus health priority, right? And that's it. Like you just want to be honest with yourself, and that will dictate how you train and how you take workouts and enjoy them and progress from there. A lot of it is just knowing what your priorities are versus just, I'm going to win every workout.
That brought two things to my mind. One is you kind of touched on it, that you have to almost do like a return on investment calculation, right? And you have to have that honest assessment of yourself. Like, okay, do I have the potential to maybe take this all the way or to a really high level? Or like, am I somewhere in that middle ground? Like I can be pretty good at this, but I'm probably not, genetically gifted enough or whatnot, or I don't have the time to punch into that top tier of athletes. So you have to do a little bit of a like, does it make sense to sacrifice these things
exactly
for this goal? Or is it really not, does it not make sense for my life? The other thing that you made me think of is, you might have those athletes who are wanting to have that performance mindset and they want to do the volume and they want to do this, that, and the other. But something you have to do as a coach, if they're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, if they're not recovering and things like that, is teach them to understand that actually if you do less because of how little you can recover, that will actually lead to you continuing to progress better than if you just try to burn the candle at both ends, sleeping 4 hours a night, doing 2 a-days, 2 sessions, 2.5, 3 hours at a time. It's like, we're really just kind of fighting physiology here. And that's not really the best way for you to go about it.
The concept of less is more.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. That's exactly where I was kind of getting at with that question, because we were kind of circling around how to focus on incorporating health in those athletes at the top end, where their goal of being sport is very obvious. If someone is at the top end of the CrossFit Games competitive sport, that their goals are performance based. But I also think it's true that we have, especially at our affiliate, we have a lot of people with competitive goals, and we have a lot of people that come to our 1 hour classes a day that I would argue do prioritize, or at times want to prioritize or create goals around prioritizing the sports side of CrossFit over just the health side of CrossFit. And that's not true with all affiliates. It's kind of, there's a different mix, and we have plenty of people that do CrossFit for health. But like you were saying, I think it really depends on your perception around kind of your goals and what you're willing to trade off and sacrifice to continue making progress towards sport goals over health related goals.
This leads into, I think, this fun conversation of like, how do we actually define a performance goal? Like, what is the metric success in the sport, or is the metric like this athlete wants to increase their 1RM back squat, 1RM snatch, 1RM this, 2K row, whatever, because those are their performance goals. Like, that's their performance, but it's not necessarily referenced against, a placement in the open or quarterfinals. But inevitably, if they increase those things, they will perform better.
Right.
Even if that's not their litmus test, if they're not like, no, I want to do this because of quarterfinals, they're just like, no, I want to row a sub 7 2K, right?
Yeah.
If they do that, it will in turn help the other. So it's like this interesting little relationship of like how you define performance and how individual athletes define what their goals are, whether it's totally metric based and performance based in a leaderboard, or if it's based off their own individual physiological capabilities.
Yeah, I would argue, and there might be differing opinions and stuff, but I would argue that anytime that you're putting a metric or an outcome focused goal out into the universe, even if it's an athlete that thinks that they show up and do CrossFit for health, I would argue that that's veering towards the sport side of the sport. And I would say that anything that's a little bit more of, and this is kind of a hot topic as far as our elite athletes, is incorporating more of those process oriented goals. I think those are more oriented towards the health side of sport. And that might be even mental health for some of our elite athletes, keeping them focused on the process and things like that. But things that can't easily be measured, I think, are a little bit more on that health side. And that might not always be true, because you can have things like a body fat metric or something like that to measure. But I would say that most of those goals are going to be a little bit more big picture and health oriented, where to me, I think sport goals are yes or no, black or white. Did I do it? Did I not? Did I hit that number? And I think even for some of our health oriented athletes, they can still have sport type goals.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's so many different ways to look at it, right? Like with a health goal, it can be something, so I'll use myself as an example, right? I like to train. I like to experiment a lot with my training. I like to push myself pretty hard. I am fortunate enough, I've grown a pretty good amount of like work capacity in the last decade of my life. But lately my goal has been not to have back pain. Mm-hmm. And if I bend over to pet my dog, I don't want my back to hurt, and I don't want to have to think about how I have to bend over. So that to me dictates a lot more about my training and my goals than any kind of placement or anything on the leaderboard. So I would definitely put myself in that. No, I'm training for health. I'm going to do hard stuff if it makes sense, but I really don't care, because my main metric that I'm chasing right now is like, I want my body to feel good while I'm in the gym training and while I'm not in the gym training.
Yeah. And I think that's a very like fine line that just because you're doing CrossFit for one or the other doesn't negate that you have to do the other one. Like if you're doing CrossFit for health, doesn't mean you have to scale everything, right? It doesn't. Like maybe you are a really good, talented athlete, right? You're just not ready in your life at this point to go to the games.
Right.
Could be just a completely like outside of the gym related thing. It doesn't have to be that you're not fit enough. That doesn't mean that you go into the gym like, okay, I'm just gonna scale everything down. No, push yourself to the limit and enjoy doing that, and that's it, right? Versus if you're an elite athlete, you can't not do warm-ups, for example, just because you want to get more volume in, right? Or you can't not focus on mobility and all that other stuff that helps you sustain being an athlete as well.
It makes me think about one of the differences you could say between a health-centered athlete or goal athlete and a sport athlete is because you should push yourself, right? We want to have the most capable body we should, but push yourself in ways that make sense to you.
Right.
It makes sense to your body. Like if you know going into the gym and doing 100 dumbbell snatches with a 70 is going to absolutely ruin you, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas when you're a competitor,
option to pick and choose.
Right. Whereas when you're a sport athlete and that's what your goal is CrossFit for sport, it's like, okay, well, maybe we have to work around that right now, or like we have to adjust things or like make sure we're doing our due diligence and recovery. But like at some point, we're going to need to do that. We can't avoid those things. Whereas with a health athlete, it's like if it's going to move the needle back too far, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So let's talk about if an athlete were coming to you guys via one-on-one and they wanted some one-on-one coaching, how would you go about assessing them and kind of figuring out where they fall on the continuum to health versus sport and where to kind of start dissecting where that line is?
I think we would both say the same thing for our starting point. Correct me if I'm wrong. I would say I would ask them what their goal is.
Yep, goal setting.
Like, what's your goals? What do you want to do? And then I think from there you can tease out a lot just from the conversation. If the immediate answer is I want to go to semifinals, we know where we're at, right? But if the answer is I want to, do better on this, and like I have a nagging shoulder, and I want to be able to run around and chase my kids or go play pickup football with my friends or whatever like that, but I just really like doing CrossFit, then we kind of have another idea on where we might be landing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a complete full spectrum in there where I want to get muscle ups, I don't think I'm gonna make it to quarterfinals, but I want to get muscle ups. So I think a full detailed conversation about what your goals are and why you have those goals, even sometimes okay, why do you want to get your muscle ups? Tell me more about what your background is and how you came to that conclusion is something that's very important. And just giving them especially on a one-on-one class or one-on-one athlete, you want to tell him that this is modifiable. This is basically molded on what you want. So please don't be shy in telling me your goals. Please don't be like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. No, tell me everything that you have and we'll mold it around your goals and how to get you to where you want to be.
Nothing makes me want to light myself on fire and stand in traffic more than when an athlete is in pain and does what I have written down and doesn't tell me till after. There's few things that make me more more just than that. Because to your point, it's all modifiable. There's so many different ways to skin the cat.
Right. And that's the point of hiring a one-on-one coach, right? So for us, we have blogs and we also have one-on-one coaching, and sometimes those things cross over. Sometimes we have our one-on-one athletes doing metcons or pieces of training from the blogs, so that way we can get them with a group of people and not out on an island doing everything solely by themselves. They get some feedback of their scores, their times, things like that help them with the sport side of the training as far as assessing where they're at and kind of where their efforts are leading. But at the same time, the point is to have a coach there in the trenches with you to modify something at any point. And that can be true for an athlete that's just looking for health too. Maybe you have a baby and the baby was up all night and you're exhausted and you have 45 minutes to do something, but you can't do your 90 minutes or 4 pieces of training that the coach wrote you for today. Text the coach, hey, I have 45 minutes. What's the most effective thing that I can get in for training today? I'm exhausted. I just need to sweat and move. That is where a one-on-one coach is for a health athlete and a sport athlete too, because those things happen just as easily for someone with the focus and goals in the sport direction. But that truly is the purpose of the coach, and it goes so much deeper than just the workout on a piece of paper and what's written for you and what boxes you're supposed to check off on any given day. Yeah. And I think sometimes that's a point that's missed a lot between what is the difference between paying for programming and paying for coaching.
I think it's interesting too. Mahmood kind of alluded to the spectrum of goals and things people have. Like, there are so many different things that athletes might want to achieve, right? I know we have athletes around in-house who really kind of prioritize weightlifting, but they want to do CrossFit still a little bit and stay, fit while they do, have a priority on weightlifting. And there's athletes who want to run longer distances and then be able to do more of powerlifting style movements and things like that. So there's so many different ways that you could kind of slice and dice things depending on what your individual goals are. And it's really hard to find a regular program that's going to get you to those specific goals, especially the further apart they are in kind. And that's where like a one-on-one coach is really helpful to create a periodization or a training model for, okay, you want to run a 5K and deadlift 500 pounds or something like that, right? And it's like, okay, well, we got to figure this out a little bit. Those are not necessarily two things that are very close in what we're asking from the body. So.
And I think also like a very good example, you, Tristan, have a couple athletes that want to get stronger. And some of those athletes are aware that in order for me to get stronger, I need to just focus on strength. And other athletes are not ready to give up doing CrossFit because they want to be ready for any competition to come up, but yet they still want to get stronger. So like it is up to like, or without you being there to kind of like, okay, this is how we're going to do this, the risk for injury, I want to say, doubles immediately if they're trying to do this on their own.
Probably.
Right? Whether they're trying to just either like it all falls down back to that spectrum of like, all right, what do you need? Let's make that happen for you. I am not a biased person. I am here to help you get to your goal. I have no biases, whether you want to not do CrossFit at all, whether you are in a home gym with no barbell, right, and you want to just do like fitness or CrossFit style movement, or whether you're a runner and you need to just enhance your running by getting a little bit stronger, right? Yeah. It's all doable, but you get to like, because like you're not emotionally inside that bubble of like, oh, I want to get better at everything, or I want to be the best that I can, and like putting timelines for yourself. You have a more objective view as a coach to like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I need you to be very highly communicable with me, just telling me how your day went, how your day outside of the gym went, what happened into the workout. And that's where you can give them how to improve on the next day and how to continue to pursue their goals through your guiding.
Right. Yeah.
On the opposite end of the spectrum too, it works just the same, but the other direction, like potentially off season, when there's a few things going on for some of those competitive athletes, we have a little bit more space to prioritize health and be like, okay, yeah, we're not going to do all the volume today. But as we move into in season, the coach's job flips to make sure that those athletes that said they have sport oriented goals, that want to prioritize that have sacrificed a lot to get to that point, are being held accountable to what those goals are, and continuing to help them keep those in focus and hold them accountable to, nope, today we have to do all the volume. Today you have to do all of the, even though you're sore, like today was about progressive overload, making sure that we're getting 2 days of pulling in a row, even if you were sore from yesterday's pulling, and kind of hold you accountable to training that may not be getting you closer to health, but is intended to improve you in sport.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a huge part, I think, of coaching competitive athletes or athletes with high level competitive goals in the sport. Like there's a time of the year where it's just sorry, like
it hurts. You
it
didn't
just
pick
is.
you didn't pick the right sport if you didn't want to hurt during
It
training.
is what it is, man. Like, I mean, especially, I've been thinking a lot about, quarterfinals prep and things like that and open prep, just because that's kind of the block of programming I've been working on a little bit in my spare time. It's like, there's going to be days that really suck. I'm sorry. Like, that's just what it is. That's the requirement to get the adaptation needed for success in the competitive field we have today.
Yeah. And even, we talked about this a little bit yesterday because we are starting to plan and write programming for that next cycle. And geez, I mean, the next cycle that we're coming up on is open and semifinals prep already. But we're even going to see a little bit of that trickle down into programming for the affiliate, because even though we have a lot of health focused athletes at our affiliate and the open is inclusive, it is something that we encourage everyone to participate in. It is a competition and it is part of our sport. So we're doing our affiliate a disservice if we don't prepare them for that intensity and prepare them for the volume that's going to be asked of them come the open time, come progressing to quarterfinals, because we do have a lot of athletes that their goal is to compete in quarterfinals. So at some level, we have to make sure that the programming and what we are putting out there for those athletes that do come to just that 1 hour class is still preparing them to take on that challenge. And then when we're coaching the affiliate, recognize if we have an athlete that's purely there for health-based goals, finding a way to modify something or keep them safe and keep them progressing and meet them halfway through the programming if they're expressing to us that that workout is not going to serve them in the best interest of their health goals. But that's definitely something that we had talked about. Our athletes are going to start seeing more frequency and more volume of similar movements because we know what's coming up in the open. We got 3 workouts and there's a pretty limited selection of what is regularly programmed in the open. So those are the movements that we're going to be practicing and training under high intensity coming up very soon here. So athletes are likely to see those movements more often and potentially be a little bit more sore from some of that repetitive movement. But the goal is purposely to prepare them for that.
Right. And again, like highlighting a point there that would be a difference between a sport athlete and a health athlete is like, if it's Wednesday and it's just a regular person who comes to the affiliate and they're like, I'm in pieces. It's like, okay, well, like, let's take the weight way down. Let's change the rep scheme. Let's do this, that, and the other. Or maybe it's like, hey, I want you to go get on the bike erg for 40 minutes and just chill, right? Or whatnot. Versus the other athlete, it's like, sorry. You have to do this, and it needs to be done with the required intensity.
Yeah, that it was programmed intentionally. That you're squatting 2 days in a row.
There is a plan. So, yeah.
All right, guys, do we have any, well, before we let go, I have a question for Tristan and Mahmood. We'll go Mahmood first. We'll swing over to him. Okay. Are you a sport or are you a health athlete right now?
Ooh,
Tristan rolled his eyes because he knows it's coming too.
I think if it were to come to like priorities, I would be a health athlete with sport goals or performance goals.
Okay.
Yeah. I would probably, if I were to choose one, whether I want to go to the games or whether I want to keep doing CrossFit for a longer time, I would probably choose health.
Yeah.
That's growth, Mahmood. I'm proud of you.
I appreciate that.
Mahmood's been a sport athlete for a long time at maybe the demise of some of his health goals. And
I can relate to that.
Professional goals too. So I think that is a mature perspective.
I appreciate that.
All right, Tristan, what do you think? Are you sport or health?
I think similar to Mahmood. I'm definitely a health athlete at the moment with some performance goals I'm kind of playing with. I mean, you guys both know my background, and I don't need to go into all that on this podcast. Maybe we can do that another time. But definitely not really willing to do anything extra that's going to take away from my responsibilities as a coach and hurt my body and my responsibilities as, a spouse and things like that. So very much using that as my kind of guiding framework. And then within my training, trying to continue to push the capacities that I have developed over the last couple years and do it in a way that makes sense and is healthy, because that's usually where I screw up. Mm-hmm. I will push the capacities in ways that I know are not smart for my body, because in the back of my head, I want to have a better performance in the sport. So letting go of that piece a little bit and just looking at it from the perspective of what can I get my body capable of doing while not running into those kind of bumpers that I've set out for myself.
Awesome.
So, and I think like it's safe to say that like me and Tristan are kind of right now both in a similar boat where we're like experimenting with programming and like trying to push our bodies. So again, just trying to emphasize that just because we're both prioritizing health right now doesn't mean that we're not gonna, for example, try and qualify for quarterfinals, right? But at the same time, the goal behind being a health athlete right now is to enjoy and make our training methodologies work for potentially another person who wants to do it in a sports setting to use it in the future. So my goal is to make what I've been working on continue to work versus getting injured midway and stopping it, which has been in the past.
Yeah, I think something important to kind of leave off with people is, because there's inevitably a timeline for all athletes where they're going to stop, even if they are sport focused, where they're going to not have that goal anymore. And being in that place myself, I've kind of had to remind myself that, okay, just because I don't have sport focused goals anymore, doesn't mean that I can't continue to push what my body's capable of. And I think that's been something that I've finally wrapped my head around in the last couple of months, is like, there are things that I am fortunate to be very, very good at that would be sport specific. But there's things that I'm not. So it's okay, well, I want to increase these metrics and I want to work on these things maybe in a different way, but I'm doing it with those guiding, principles of like, I want to be healthy. I don't want to be in pain all the time, and I'm not going to sacrifice my other responsibilities. But when I'm in the gym, like, we gonna get it. Like, I'm not just bullshitting, right? I'm not doing muscle ups anymore because I'm not a competitive athlete, right? Or training for sport. It's like, no, I developed the capacity in those things. I'm going to continue to do them because I enjoy them and they make sense for me, right? Exactly. With the health framework.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for today. If you are an athlete out there, check out our page, Ascend Athlete. You can reach out to us. All of our Instagram handles are there at the top. If you want a little more guidance and kind of determining where your path is, what your goals are, if they're more health oriented or sport oriented, and how you're going to achieve them, please reach out to us and we can talk about kind of bringing you on board and what we can do to help you out in your journey.
Awesome.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. We'll talk later. Have a good day.
See ya. Bye.
You too. Bye.